Seclusion and restraint. They're controversial methods of discipline like the ones you see here. They can leave students traumatized, even injured. The state's supposed to track how often it happens.
But when News Channel 5 investigators reviewed Ohio's incident database, we found some serious flaws. Investigator Sarah Buttison, I guess you can say the information was a mess.
We found all sorts of problems. Seclusion and restraint happen every day in schools around the state, usually to the most vulnerable students. But we found it's almost impossible to figure out what's really going on in Ohio's classrooms.
Time to go.
This surveillance video shows middle school student Sean Green being disciplined using a controversial method known as restraint. After his teacher grabs him by the throat and knocks him to the ground for refusing to log off a computer, Sean swings a chair at her. She pushes him across the room and up against a wall until two staff members rush in, force him to the floor, and hold him there for several minutes.
It was a bar fight. It wasn't a proper restraint of a child acting out.
Pick a card out of your hand.
Sean's mother, Tammy, says the incident caused him to become withdrawn and fear going to school. Like any 14-year-old, he likes to joke and is often glued to his video games. But Sean is different.
Level up.
He has autism, suffers from anxiety and other behavioral disorders. He can't process what happened.
Sean's just not the same. He never will be, ever.
The experts see this as a failure. It's a treatment failure, it's a systems failure, it's a resource failure.
Michael Kirkman is the head of Disability Rights Ohio and the father of a child with disabilities. He has fought for years to stop schools from using restraint like what happened to Sean, and the practice of seclusion, where a misbehaving child is locked alone inside a room like this specially built one.
They should never be used.
But both methods often are on children with disabilities.
There's no disciplinary value to this at all.
Ohio finally adopted a new rule in 2013. Schools can only use seclusion or restraint when there's a risk of physical harm to the student or others, and have to report every incident to the state so it can spot misuse. But when News Channel 5 investigators reviewed Ohio's database, we found serious problems. 64 or 10% of Ohio's 614 school districts didn't send in any information, including Beechwood City Schools. Their superintendent told us it was an oversight. Even more troubling, hundreds of districts left answers blank or gave useless responses. When asked if they take a look at students' behavior plans after restraint incidents, Mentor Public Schools answered, "I don't know."
It's hard to tell from the data, though, anything that's really meaningful.
But Michael says one thing is clear.
Too many kids are being secluded and restrained. The rule makes it it should never happen, almost.
Districts reported close to 14,000 incidents for the 2013-2014 school year. For weeks, we asked state officials about the reporting problems, but didn't get any answers. My name is Sarah. I'm with News Channel 5. So we went to Columbus to talk to Superintendent Richard Ross, but a staff member literally pushed me away. What are you doing to prevent seclusion, restraint, and finally, the next day, Susan Zake sat down with us. What grade would you give the state when it comes to collecting this data?
I would say that we're probably running at about a C in the collection of this data right now, to be honest.
She's in charge of gathering the information.
Do I know whether or not things were underreported? I don't know that for a fact. Could they have been? Sure. Could they have been overreported in some places and underreported in others? Possibly.
You could conclude that the department doesn't care about those kids because they don't want to follow up on their own requirement.
We care. And we care deeply.
Zake says this year should be better. There's a new reporting system that includes information about what data schools should send in. And what about education alternatives, where Sean went to school? They're private and don't have to submit any information about what happens in their classrooms.
If they don't have to be held accountable for their actions and what they're doing, who's to say they're not going to cross that line?
Tammy has filed a lawsuit against Education Alternatives. Its CEO declined to comment for our story because of that lawsuit, but did tell us the teacher in the video you saw no longer works there. On your side, I'm investigator Sarah Buttison, News Channel 5.